All right. Hello, everyone. Orhan Mc Millan with Manfulness Living. Welcome. Glad you are here. I am very excited today to be joined by my friend Kirk Vidrine. Kirk and I have known each other for a few decades here, and don't need to exactly say how long. Not that age matters to me, but yes, we've known each other for a while. Kirk became an early Manfulness Living participant and member. And so, we've just kind of, stayed close through all things. And so just wanted to bring Kirk on today. So Kirk is the owner of Be Well Solutions, health, nutrition, well-being, holistic, everything, right? And so I want to talk about that. So Kirk, welcome today. I'm so glad you're able to join. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Good. Before we started recording, Kirk and I were having a few minutes of celebrating Louisiana in July, right? What was going to be a gorgeous outside interview scene for me turned into a hot, sweaty mess when the breeze stopped. And so I'm like, all right, Kirk, 5 minutes running late, gotta move everything. So as a friend said, I'm in my duck blind, and it's not my duck blind, but said that. So, but at least there's coolerness here. And then of course, you can't be in you can't be in Louisiana and heat and everything without, the mosquitoes zapping you on your head. So, maybe
rolling with the punches.
We're men. We're manfulness.
Yes, absolutely.
It ain't gonna stop this. But I tell you one thing, if and whenever I have a makeup artist, y'all never would have seen that. nor the Santa Claus shine. But anyway, I'm wasting time here. Kirk, what's happening today, my man? How are you doing?
No, I'm great, man. It's stuck at home like everybody else is, but I got a wonderful wife, great kids, and life generally is good. I'm luckier than most people.
Man, I would celebrate that. I've watched you through the years and the family, and it was like this when y'all would come through the gym. It was of course you and your wife first, and
right.
then one little one, and then another little one, and it was like this trail, like a little trail of like ducks or something, walking in this little line. The kids were always so amazing, and that was one thing that always really stood out to me. And I don't know if you and I have ever had a chance to talk about it. Was how you, all your kids and your wife, y'all participated in so many things together. I mean, you kind of moved as a unit. Yeah. And, as a father, I'd love to hear a little bit more. I know, some of the guys listening, that's a lot to be able to do that, because at that time you were starting your career in
the health industry. Yeah.
So how did you tell me a little bit about just kind of reflecting on that? How did the Vidrine Duck family come to be?
Oh, that's so when we moved to Baton Rouge, we were going to school, and so Alicia was going to school, and I started school in exercise science and moved over to dietetics. I was working 3 jobs. We had kids in college, and we were just trying to keep our life together, and we made plenty of mistakes and lived very stressed out and very broke for a very long time. And then, I went into graduate school and did my graduate work in nutrition, and throughout the whole thing, we were, some of it was a little bit of luck. We watched a lot of Super Nanny. She helped out a lot. She was shockingly useful. I didn't know we were bad parents because our first kid was so good. Like, we didn't realize, we have pictures of him with like chocolate all over his face, like sleeping in a high chair. And we're like, oh, we're great parents. We know what we're doing.
We're doing well here.
Yeah, we're doing great. And then we're looking around, talking to other parents, and they're like, oh, what, your kid goes to bed at 8:30 at night? Whoa, like mine doesn't do that. So we learned a little bit. So I think we do have a wonderful family, and my kids are really great. Part of it is just that they take after their mom. But the other part, I think, is we are very involved in their life. We talk to them a lot. We cook together pretty often. We have actual things. I think one of the things that as a father I struggled with is the sort of concept that you want to be close to your kids, but they're kids and you're an adult. You have different interests, right? You love them, but they start talking about Pokemon or whatever else. It's really not all that cool. And so you're trying to figure out how to have interactions with them that everybody's interested in. And forced ones really weren't working for me very well, at least in my experience. So cooking and playing sports outside together, or going for walks or drawing together, playing card games. These were natural things that we sort of integrated into our life that really worked very well. In fact, we have a weekly ritual every single week on Friday evenings where we make homemade pizza together, and then we draw up our menu for next week. So everybody pulls out cookbooks. We have way too many cookbooks. I got like 200 cookbooks in my house. I'm insane. But the kids will look through the cookbooks. My wife will look through the cookbook. We'll all discuss what we're gonna, eat. And so we'll make a reasonable menu with vegetables and good healthy food. But everybody has like input, and so they'll do that all together, and we'll decide who's gonna cook when. And the benefit of that is that we all end up in the kitchen cooking more often together, and we all end up eating at the table more frequently together. And that leads to just natural interactions. And the other advice I would give is natural conversation starters. I think that people have done this before. I think it really works very well. But at the table, when we eat together, it's it's always so silly. My kids are ridiculous. I have not mastered manners with them whatsoever.
Good.
But
I mean, that's overrated.
Yeah, well, some of it is. Some of it they could work on. But we have two games that we played that I think are really good. One is just sort of that sort of high-low game where we say something, what is the best part of your day, the worst part of your day, and the funniest part of your day. And everybody goes around the table talking about it. So you get to listen and understand, and everybody gets their kind of time in the limelight. And the other one is I'm thinking of an animal. So it's kind of like a 20-question game where you don't have a limit on questions, but you just kind of pelt each other with yes or no questions. It's got 4 legs, is it a mammal, whatever else. And people get to, go around the table picking an animal and see how long it takes for somebody to figure it out. That just inevitably evolves into laughter and silliness, and it leads to more conversations later on in life. So
Really
all the things
does.
that we've done wrong,
And
we've got a
well,
few of those things right.
Well, you got 2 things going well for you, and a couple of things that stood out. First of all, thank you for that cookbook thing. Right, I'm so doing that. So as you know, I don't have kids, but I have a lot of kids around me, and so right now I've got 2 older teens staying with me for the part of the summer. Every summer they come stay 3 or 4 weeks, and that's a great
really cool.
idea. It really is a great idea to say, hey, here. Pick out something, like you said, I've got several cookbooks. I love cooking. I'm a natural great cook.
Just flip through them.
And just look through them. And what came to me as you're talking about that, there's so many levels that that's happening there. There's participation, there's empowerment, there's choice making, there's moving as a unit. And I think that was one of the things that I saw years ago was the unitary movement of you as a family, because a lot of times I see families in their different levels, their different hierarchies. So there's mom or dad doing something, and then kids may come in at this point, and then kids here and stuff like that. But the unitary thing, and I can see now why that is, because you can even see, I watch how you have the book, I'm sure you'll talk about that too, your video shows that you do online, the video cooking things. And there is such a natural flow. Now I understand why, because it's even more natural than you would see on cooking shows. It's because it seems, from what I'm understanding that you're saying, is y'all kind of built this into your operating system as a family. And so therefore it's easy.
It's just what we do. Yeah, it just became what we do. And I'm a proponent of that kind of thing, just in general, in lots of different aspects in life. I'll talk about all kind of stuff for hours, but generally speaking, when you have like a goal and you have people participate, you find sort of the system that works, and it becomes a natural interaction between people. So I think that works out pretty well. And you're right. Like, particularly with food, I'm a nutritionist, and all the letters behind my name are in nutrition, and I've got a lot of expertise in that. And yet what I find most of the time is when people talk about nutrition, they just go way off the deep end. Like they go to super nutrition. Gotcha. And it's like, they worry about all these little things and they talk about for hours and debate all these different topics. And then they turn around and go home and eat pizza and drink beer. It's like, what? All that debate and information wasn't all that useful. Right. And in our house, what we found, if I've gone on every diet on the book, when I was younger, I tried all kind of crazy stuff, and my wife has gone on diets. And what we found is we're very healthy and lean. And it happened more naturally just when we created a good food lifestyle and quit worrying about being perfect. We were just reasonable, and everything kind of fell into place. And I think that generally speaking, at least with nutrition, that is a bigger issue, is that whether you're family, single, anything else, just having a plan of any sort and being reasonable with it and liking your food tends to be the biggest success maker.
And I hear that, and that's really great information. And having fun with it also, it seems like a level of it, because, when you tie in, so, you have the physical body, but you also have the chemical part of the body that we know, and most people know, that positive joy, laughter, all of those things create less stressful environments in our body, not even just stress in general, but the stress inside of the body, which means it's going to produce more of the natural positive hormones in the body, and just have fun. So yeah, okay, chocolate chip cookies periodically it's not going to kill anything.
Absolutely.
And it's part of, it's almost like, one thing I've noticed about diets in general is it's all or nothing. I've got to be 1,000% committed or I'm going to fail. Well, I know from my experience just in mindfulness and just awareness, first of all, that's a formula for disaster. Perfection is not an achievement. There is no such thing as perfection. It's just about a journey and finding where you're going to go with that. So you set up these things as adults, right? That I need to do this and I can't eat this and I can't eat this. But then you have a child who is trying to figure out his or her way inside of that. And, just make it fun is what I'm hearing you say.
Well, so absolutely. If you don't like the food, and if it doesn't fit in your lifestyle, this is definitely not going to work for the next 60 years. There's no way you're going to willpower it out. There's lots of research that we could talk about where that we know does not work. I
was in the family that you sat and ate, and if you didn't, it wasn't a question, and that's a different. I need a psychologist as my one on that one. But yes, that's how we were raised, and I've seen it doesn't work. It does not work, and it causes more long-term nutrition problems and eating problems than anything
dysfunction
else.
Absolutely.
Dysfunction, yes.
Right. In fact, what a lot of people find odd, sometimes they one of the things that I think is an important skill set, more in going on diet, is just developing healthy life skills and treating them as a skill that you develop as opposed to something you have to be on or off. But I would argue that the skill of having treats, you're talking about having a cookie and the benefit emotionally of having cookie. Food should nourish your soul and not just your body. It should do both. It is more than
food should nourish your soul and not just your body. Okay.
Absolutely. And you could talk about the science, and I love that, but to be very, when cultures around the world, food has been a primary source of celebration, of love, of care, and it brings
of everything. Yes.
It's central and it's necessary. So it does need to nourish you as far as your physical health, but it nourishes your emotional soul. It also helps bring communities together and families together. And that is part of the food. When you take that away from people, when you diet severely, these really restrictive, people suffer from that. And it's one of the reasons it's very difficult to be on a diet long term. And I would argue that learning how to emotionally have a treat properly is super important. I tell the story all the time of a client I had who came in, and he was a very healthy guy Monday through Thursday. And then every Thursday afternoon, he had a friend who would bring this big giant chocolate chip cookie to him. And he's working out and doing all this stuff. And every Thursday afternoon, he'd eat the cookie, and then he would fall off a cliff. And the rest of Thursday through Sunday, he would not work out. He wouldn't do anything. He would just eat chips and just go nuts. It's like, I can't stop myself. And I said, well, look, here's what you do. And I think this is a very important skill for everybody to do. Have the cookie and enjoy it. And then the next time you eat, whether it's 10 minutes later or the next day, I don't care. Just the next time you eat a healthy meal. Yes. And what that does is it puts you back on track to going back to normal after having it. So it's not that all or nothing. I'm either on or diet, I'm off. And he lost 20 pounds in about 6 weeks from that one thing. It wasn't super science. Yeah, he just learned to not fall off a cliff when he ate a cookie. Just have your cookie, enjoy it, and go back to normal.
Right. And the other part that that kind of came with me on that is it's like being present with it. That's because that's a lot of what we talk about with the mindfulness. Mindfulness is being present with it, being centered with it, go to it from a place of here's where I am. And on top of that, we know eating a chocolate chip cookie throws up cortisol, it throws up the insulin, it throws up the thyroid, everything else. So if you come in with something balanced next, you're going to settle that down quicker as opposed to, going down the train of sugar, because then your body's, obviously the man has some reaction to it, and then you're just going to keep feeding it that, but I like that a lot. I want to go back to the ceremony, and actually I wrote that quote down: "Food should nourish the soul, not just the body." The 4th of July weekend. So I've made homemade vanilla ice cream. Oh my God. I mean, I've made it for years, and I'm kind of, exaggerating right here. How much cream can you put in anything? I mean, I think it was like 12 cups of heavy cream, and not even half and half, right? And then 8 eggs, and, I was like, wow, okay. Point being, I grew up with my grandparents making homemade ice cream. I have fond memories of my grandfather with his big arm sitting on the wood thing, just turning that thing. And then we as kids, he'd be like, all right, come. If we could do it at first, but then as that stuff got harder, that's why he had an arm that big. We'd be like, stepping on it, jumping on it. And as I was making it, obviously I don't do that. I have the electric one, but it's outside. But as I'm doing it, the kids that were around for 4th of July, I shared that story, and, just kind of talked about my experience with that. And on the inside of me, it brought such joy, such memory, such positivity to be able to be doing that whatever calories and fat and all that stuff, I'm so not worried about that because of eating the soul experience that it had. Yeah.
Well, and so I think there is enough evidence around the world when you look at food cultures to suggest that is completely fine. You turn around and look throughout Asia, throughout the Mediterranean, throughout Latin America, various parts of Africa, you're going to see that there are food cultures that have a lot of celebratory foods, a lot of these types of things, where the obesity rate and the health statistics for mortality diseases that are lifestyle based are very, very low. I'll give you some quick examples.
Please.
We're looking at the U.S. In the U.S. prior to COVID-19, the average obesity rate was between 36 to 40%, which is usually number one in the world. And it accounts for a direct correlation of over 300,000 deaths every single year, which is 10 times more than 10 times the combined death total of car accidents, homicides, and HIV put together. Yes. So that was a huge, huge issue. And if you look at other places that you would consider like food cultures that are very rich, like France, like Italy, and Spain, throughout that Mediterranean, or places like Japan,
Asia,
Asia. So Japan and Korea have the lowest obesity rate in the world at just 3%. 3%. We're almost at 40%, and their staple food is white rice. So obviously it's more than just carbohydrates. It's more than just celebratory foods. Italy, 25% of people eat white pasta every single day. 70-something% of people eat it at least 3 times a week. But how they eat it, the volume they eat it, the amount of other vegetables that are added to it, it shows that
how it's prepared. Exactly. And what's added to it, as opposed. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So it makes it more complex in a way, because nutrition is a very young science that is learning as we go. And there's a lot of nutrient interactions that we were putting together. I did research in protein, in fish oil, in resistant starch, and all that stuff. And it's very cool stuff. But right now we're learning as we're going. And so while all these sciences are kind of building on this cool nutrition stuff and this kind of advanced nutrition science, you have to step back and put that into context of some of the cultural wisdom that over thousands of years, cultures from around the world have fed and nourished their people well, without necessarily having all the biochemistry that we have to look at today. We're confirming a lot of things that we sort of instinctively knew. And some of it is very common sense. Eat mostly real food and a lot of what I call power plants, which is fruits, vegetables, beans and legumes, whole grains, and nuts and seeds. Those should be, that and water should be the foundation of your diet. You can drink alcohol, but you can't drink it to excess, which means 1 to 2 drinks a day on average, and not saving up for the weekend to power drink 14 drinks. Cajuns are wonderful people.
Getting there. That guy. So a cookie is a cookie is a glass of wine. So I got to do.
So that was good till Thursday. But yeah, like I love talking to certain cultures. In particular, I enjoy talking about Mediterranean cultures because I think they describe, it's not the Mediterranean diet is one that's come out, but it is while they talk about it from the Mediterranean, because the original research started in Crete, Greece, where they were looking at men in Crete who were eating a high fat diet, high carb, high fat, and yet they were not having the heart disease that they were seeing in the same types of diet in other parts of Europe. So that we started the beginning of research on the Mediterranean diet, which led to Mediterranean lifestyle research and showed there was more than just diet in the factors that were helping with these longevity studies and the blue zones and all these other wonderful things. But we see that it's not held just to the Mediterranean. These dietary patterns, these lifestyle patterns have been seen across the world through a lot of different cultures. And there's a lot of similarities. And when you sort of boil them down, we're taking a complex subject and showing that some lifestyle factors are making huge differences in people legitimately living longer, less disability free, leaner lives. And some of it, a lot of it has to do with the stuff that you are an expert in, which is lifestyle factors to deal with mitigating stress. And how do you mitigate stress and different things of that nature?
Plays a huge part of it. You know, I'm Turkish. I mean, my mother's Turkish, and so it was that everything that we grew up eating and that I cook now and experience when I went there. It's amazing food, right? It is, and it is high fat. I mean, it is. There's not something that's not olive oil based or something like feta cheese, whatever it is. And earlier this year, I had my first trip to the east, and I went to Okinawa, and I fell in love with the food. But that's one thing that I quickly observed. I'm like, y'all are eating so much of what is not supposed to be eating, but look at you. I mean, y'all, I mean, a lot of it. I mean, it's not like they were eating little bitty thing. We're talking like a lot of, like 6 times a day eating. And so that got me thinking about that. And so, one thing that I know to be true, and I know that you'll support this as well, is that if you start looking at those things like you're talking around the globe, so if those are the nutritional habits of people and what they eat and what they consume, and we try that here in the United States and it fails because 30 to 40% obesity, then I have to lead to the next question is, why is that? What is going on? And just look at our lifestyle. I mean, look at anxiety, stress, work, the chasing the hamster wheel, all of those things. Well, I know, and you know that, when you start entering those stressors into the body, you're defeating a lot of the purpose of what you're trying to consume, right?
It's like trying to run with an anchor on, right? It'd be a lot easier if you just drop the anchor to start running. You probably walk faster and you wouldn't have to try as hard.
Yes.
So the issue, and so there's a lot of great research, and anybody's listening to this, I heavily advise you to look up the blue zones and learn all about them. So that is research on the longest living, healthiest people in the world. And what they have found is that about 20% of your longevity, how long you live, is based on your genetics, but 80% is based on your behavior patterns.
Wow.
So there's good science beside that is showing this. And then so they reverse engineered longevity by saying, okay, we know it's behavior, who lives the longest? And they found the 5 different locations around the world. So it was not just one culture. All over the world, they found these locations, and then they visited them and studied them heavily in the early 2000s and found a link of behavior patterns that showed that it was very useful for living longer, healthier lives. And so much so, they live more than a decade more than we do, more than 10 times more centenarians, people who live to 100 than we do. And they live in a much more vibrant way where they live healthier into their old age. And what I tell people all the time is living healthy doesn't, not only this can be wonderful. I live a great lifestyle and I love the food that I eat. I'm a foodie to the highest order. I cook all the time and I am really good at it. Tooting my horn there. But it's so you can love the food that you eat. You can love your lifestyle as well, but it also means less medication. It means less pain. It means all these wonderful things.
It's inflammation. I mean, finally, the word inflammation is coming into a little bit more common conversation about disease, and low-level inflammation constantly in the body will deplete the body. And the low-level inflammation is stressors, etc. I mean, and the food and the processed and things like that. And that's why you see in poor areas that say that the Dollar General is their grocery store in poor
No,
areas.
access is, yeah,
You know,
it's a big issue.
that throws up diabetes, throws up hypertension, throws up the stressors
Right,
in the body, plus the exterior factors of the body. I mean, that's
right.
a recipe for a disaster.
Well, so to bring that back, one of the biggest findings, in my opinion, of the blue zones and many of the other cultures throughout the Mediterranean and all these places that are showing really great health statistics, despite the fact that they make less money and have less access to healthcare or better healthcare than we do, is the fact that it's an accident. Like, these cultures did not mean to be healthy. They didn't do it on purpose. They didn't say, hey, we're going to build this healthy community. It happened because their culture was built around various pressures that said this is how you live, and those pressures happen to have health effects. We are suffering for the exact same thing. In the US, we are pushed to be more and more sedentary by the way that our environment is built, and all the way our job, we work, we travel, and we play on our sedentarily. We don't do that in a physically active way anymore. And of course, that the amount of food that we have and how we get our food is much more processed, much more junk that's going in that's cheaper and it's easier to access. While
Easier,
the
faster,
old fashioned,
yes, exactly.
right. And then more people work, the longer hours that we work, more stress at work, more demand. So less time to downshift and relax, less time to go and cook real food. So when you have less time, you also develop less skills. So when you ask people to go in and without any of this stuff, go work out, go do all these things, there's lots of questions and people get very detailed, overly scientific answers. But what the basic thing is, can you go into your house on a Tuesday night exhausted and put a meal together that's decently healthy, that's not going to, blow your blood sugar level up in 20 minutes that the kids are actually going to eat? And this is a skill that has not been found. So you go into your house and you end up like making a bucket of mess in the kitchen, and you have all these dishes to do, and it was a real pain in the butt. And sometimes you burn it, and so it becomes pizza night. So those skill sets have not been set up, and particularly with certain populations, poor populations in general, access to good food is restricted. The ability to purchase good food and get to it, if you put barriers in people's way, we know no matter how much they should do it right, there's just, life is too much other stresses to get that the right way.
Right. The
Education,
not there,
right.
and education's not there. Yes.
Education is really important. But my work with Shell Oil, when I ran their health department, we knew that education was important, but it was most certainly not enough. There was a 3-part system that we used that was shockingly effective, that we had effects that had so many people participating. I'll give you just a quick example. When you do corporate wellness, which is what my company primarily does, health coaching for individuals and corporate wellness for businesses, what you find is corporate wellness is just typically like an email that people auto delete, or something you put on a board that nobody does, or the random challenge.
The little things in that lunchroom next to the
let's do the fruit of the month.
Right. Yeah.
And then people do let's do a running challenge or a step challenge, and it falls off the wayside. These are all good ideas and pieces to the puzzle. But if you don't do it in a system, like a good system was really vibrant, what you get is about 10 to 20% of people participate. And that has a moderate effect on the bottom line and on people's health. But it's typically the 10 to 20% who are already interested in what you're selling. You're trying to get people to be healthy. You didn't need to convince them. They were going to be there anyway. So at Shell, we got 75% or more people to participate in our programs for over 5 years running. We dropped the obesity rate by 5% in the most obese place possibly in the world. I can't give you the statistics and remind me to give, but it was really bad. We dropped it 5%. We lowered their health insurance by an uncountable, massive savings. We had the best absenteeism scores globally, the best morale scores globally, and some of the highest safety scores globally, everywhere that we put wellness in. But the only reason we got that is because we had a 3-part system that actually worked. Okay. And it involved not just educating, but after you educate people what they need to do, giving them direct challenges that they're simple and easy to understand, that they can implement in their lives, actions to do. And then that's still not enough. After that, we had to support them. We had to change their environment and give them coaching so that they would have support systems to get them through the hard times. The combination of those 3 gave us these massive success rates. And I think there's enough evidence to say that that's exactly what needs to be implemented. When you're talking about changing health of your life or your company or America as a whole, you do need education, and you do need some specific things to attack and do. They don't have to be complicated. They have to, in fact, they should be simple and just sort of big picture things.
Exactly. Yes.
And then you need to support. You need somebody to help keep you accountable and support you as a human being. And also you need to change your environment as much as possible. You need to make the healthy choice the easiest choice possible. You don't need Superman to push it through. In fact, that's the worst thing you can do, is try to be super motivated to make it. You should try to change your environment to make whatever is bad for you harder to get to. I'm giving you a weird statistic. It's funny, but this is a good one. If you make junk food, something you're not supposed to eat, 20 seconds harder to get to, like just move it to some cabinet, it's 20 seconds harder to get to, you'll reduce the chances of you eating it by 86%.
Wow.
That's a huge thing, right? So just move that stuff out of the way.
Move it out the way.
Make it harder to get to, and make the good stuff, fruit, vegetables, walking. If you develop an environment where walking is normal, where gardening is normal, where playing sports with your buddies are normal, where eating at the table is normal, if that is the easy go-to thing, that's what you're going to do, because humans are built to be, we call it lazy. I don't think that's accurate. Humans are built to be efficient. Yes. Right? We are constantly making our life more efficient. So we need the efficiency to be more towards health benefits, so make the things that keep you moving, keep you active, keep you eating well, keep you visiting with people, keep you emotionally healthy, keep you meditating more frequently. Make that built into your day and more easy to get to. Don't make it a harder thing. Remove as many barriers as possible.
Barriers. And that's a lot. That's a lot of great stuff. I'm going to come back to a couple of things. I really resonate and want to pull back on the three things: the education, the specific, and the support. Because going with that, what I think I'm hearing in that, or what I can relate with that, is I'm having small wins, right? And then with a small win will be a next step, and a next step, and a next step, and a little next small step. By having the support, I kind of have the check-in. It's right. Like, okay, or this didn't work out, or this, or you're doing fine. Just that kind of thing. By having those three components there, then that makes it, I imagine that eventually it's going to hit a cruising altitude, that then they're going to be able to manage it on their own. And then they're off in the wild blue yonder with that.
So to build on that point, there was some great research done on New Year's resolutions and habit creation.
Right.
And what they found is that people who try to change one behavior at a time had an 85% success rate. But as soon as it moved to two behaviors, it dropped to 35%. And three or more, it's less than 10%.
Right. And then and look at our resolution concept. It's like, what are your top three New Year resolutions? I've spoken against that for years now.
So that concept, and my experience as a personal trainer and nutrition coach, what I noticed is that what happened to people is they would look in the mirror one weekday and just get completely fed up, frustrated with it. And they're like, I'm not doing this. I'm starting. This is me. I'm going to change this completely. After the weekend in LSU football, I'm totally on it. And then Monday morning, they're like super me, but they don't just change their breakfast or, go work out. They're like, I'm gonna work out 5 hours a day. I'm gonna eat 6 times a day. I'm gonna clear my inbox. I'm gonna be the best dad. I'm gonna be the best husband.
Meditate,
I'm gonna be super me.
All this. Okay, all of a sudden, it ain't happening.
No, and I tracked this once, and I found that people, when they were starting to change their bodies, were doing 10 to 12 different behavior changes at one time and failing at a 98% rate. So that's a scary fact, that every nutrition and dietary program that's put out there that has no support system has a 98% failure rate. So support systems are very hard, whether it's a friend or a professional, it's very important. With that said, though, when my practice, what I found for a complete body transformation, that it took 3 to 6 behavior changes to transform somebody's body. Okay. And I attribute that to what I call the ripple effect, which everybody, I think, is instinctive. It will happen. If you start getting more sleep at night, you're likely to be less tired. You're likely to emotionally eat less. You're likely to go work out more. You might be happier. So the ripple of getting sleep means you do these other behaviors kind of on accident. And so I feel that if you, whether it's about finances or stress or family or exercise, whatever, if you pick one behavior to do right and you do that behavior till it becomes a habit, and then you build the next habit on top of that, what you end up getting is not only stacking habits together a piece at a time to get where you need to go, but you have all these ripple effects or all these other behaviors just naturally occur because you're doing this one thing better. Perfect. And you're avoiding all these other things because you're doing something that replaces it. So that is, that's what I've seen.
I'll add another part that is in tandem with that. So as you're doing those things from a mental, energetic, personal, spiritual side of it, okay, so put in over here on the mindfulness stuff on this. What you're also doing is you're feeling more positive about yourself.
Absolutely.
You're having more positive emotions. Like, I can do this. This one small thing I can do. You're creating more momentum. You're creating more time that you do rest, that you do recognize these small little things that we're naturally incentivized as a species. I'm going to change something only if the thing on the other side of the change that's needed is greater than my resistance to it.
Absolutely.
So whether that's feeling good, feeling more energetic, feeling more, whatever, it's got to be a little bit stronger than where I'm sitting at right now. Otherwise, I'm not going to do that. And then this is when all those things, when you're really firing on all pistons and things like that, is then you realize that there's really not a lot you can't do. There's not a lot of things you cannot manage. There's not a lot of stressors, because then you're able, especially with the mindfulness and the meditation stuff. One of the things I say to myself all the time, I don't need to make that decision right now, because what I've trained myself is that's something very big. I'm not in a place to do that right now. I'm going to hold off on that. But I do know that then that day, if I go out and in my garden, or if I'm in, doing my yoga or cutting grass or whatever it is, playing with my dogs, that when I come back to that same exact problem, it's most of the time 70% less. It's just that my anxiety was up about it. And if I would have dove into it and tried to put my teeth into it, I would have lost at some point. But those two things together, and that's why that's when the good change happens, is that not only are you experiencing this on an emotional level, on emotional well-being, but your body's also benefiting from it too.
Oh, to piggyback on what you're talking about there's a concept out in the world called scatter focus and hyper focus. Okay. And so it's not exactly what you're talking about, but it has the same sort of concept. And my understanding of it is that hyper focus is that time where you kind of get in a groove with work and you can block everything else out, and you just time flies, you don't even notice it, and you're crushing it at work. And at that point in time, from what I understand, is your brain's ability to make connections and have aha moments is very diminished. And yet when you are not focusing, daydreaming in your shower or whatever else, you have all these wonderful ideas that pop together. They call that scatter focus. Okay. And one of the things that one of these productivity experts mentioned when I was trying to learn more about productivity, and we're putting that into shell concepts, was that you need time, most of your time, to hyper focus and try and get in your groove during your workday. But when you have a hard problem that you can't fix, it's a good thing to get away from it and go do other things, not just because it de-stresses you, but also because your brain is reorganizing things and there's connections that may be made that you're not aware of. You're right. So then when you come back.
That's amazing, because that's a practice. I mean, that's part of one practices that I teach and coach about is I call it the decluttering. I mean, different phrases.
Absolutely.
If this is cluttered up and overdone, nothing new is ever coming in. It's why the aha moments happen in the shower. It's why the aha moments happen when you're driving. If you're not, doing 80 emails, 50 phone calls, and a Zoom meeting while you're driving, it's those places that you just let the brain, because it's how it works. By letting those in, you're more productive, you get more things done, you're happier doing it, it's more success rate, you're more efficient, and guess what? It's fun.
I think that there's enough research to support the sort of that idea that there's been science that's been done behind it that says what you're saying that we kind of instinctively know is true is actually true. It's not an old wives' tale. Yeah. So they talk about something called brain plasticity, which is a big fancy word that basically means the brain is not as set as we once thought. Like you've probably heard the idea that brain cells don't like recreate themselves. And you just kind of had, that's not true. Neurons in your brains do recreate and they do grow throughout your life. They just don't grow at the rate that skin cells do. So that being said, one of the things about the brain is that parts of your brain can become more or less active and can actually reorder themselves inside the brain. That's called brain plasticity. It's a big sciencey word, but it basically just means that one side of the brain is becoming more active than the other. And in particular, when you talk about what you are the expert in, which is meditation, the research behind there's more and more research coming out that two parts of the brain are kind of fighting with each other, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system is the older part of the brain that's kind of right here, and that system is the instinctive system. It's the more emotional system, and it's very, very important. It allows it has some dysfunctions, and
it's the reactive system. It's the fight or flight
it
system.
is.
That's the ones
Right.
when, oh my God, I need to run. There's a dinosaur coming or a tiger.
Right.
I need to get out the way.
and it is also the reason that we procrastinate, right? So the prefrontal cortex is the more rational system that it kind of long-term thinking, but it's a lazier system. It's younger, it's not as strong. And it's the one that if the limbic system says, I don't want to do this, Netflix is more important, then it's just going to get bullied. And so you tend not to do that. Tends to drive that procrastination a little higher. But it's very important that it doesn't make it a bad system. And overall, if you need to save somebody who's falling off a ladder, you don't have time to sit down and do calculations.
Well, I don't need to
doing
reflect on how I feel about, okay, how do I feel?
Yeah,
exactly.
What's the right angle to run?
How am I going to feel about this in the morning? And with the meditation and the mindfulness and the breathing stuff, it develops that frontal cortex more.
It does.
The balance in that. And so that it's strengthening the muscle is what it is. Because like you said, it is a newer part, of that.
Yeah.
But by doing those studies and research shows that it becomes a more prominent system in this magnificent brain that we have. Because you're right, we want it all. I need all those things working as best as they can.
Right. And again, it just happens to be, it's kind of like low back pain is a lot of times it's due to your hip flexor iliopsoas muscle just being stronger than the ab muscles, and it just overwhelms it. It's not that one's a bad muscle and one's a good muscle. It's just one is just constantly winning. And so with that, if the limbic system is just stronger naturally, dampening it a little bit with mindfulness and prayer or meditation helps to develop and put in balance both of them. And then you end up instead responding instead of reacting. So you're more likely to make a good decision, not take things personally, do the right thing, not procrastinate, make plans. Yeah. And in fact, one of the things we're talking about nutrition, I always found I was studying French culture at one point in time because my heritage, where my family came from, was Bordeaux, France. And one of the things I noticed is even in child rearing, they have a method to do that. It's a bit of like mindfulness in a lot of ways that they eat, but they also, with rearing children, they have what's called, I call the pause method, that even as infants, when infants would cry or as children would want something from their parents, they would purposely pause. It's not that they wouldn't address the issue, but they would give it a couple minutes to see if it was a really bad issue or if it was just a baby turning over or the kids just needing to grab something. And what happens is that the children, as they grow, start to develop a bit of ability to wait, ability to put across that instinctive of, I need to do it now. I need to right this second. And they do this with food. Not only do they eat slowly, but they purposely eat in a sort of formal setting at a table, and that in this slow manner, drinking while eating, this sort of structural behaviors that they don't think of it as a health behavior. It's just how they live their life. They've just been taught that naturally. This is how you do things. But a side benefit is they're sort of driving mental controls over their behavior as far as like, how patient they are, and how much frustration they can
And
deal
again,
with.
going back to what you said, response over react.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
less reaction, more response. And what I'm hearing you say is that they put this in their own personal practice, and they also develop that tendency or that learned behavior inside of the youth, and the child that then becomes the youth, and becomes a teen, and then becomes the adult, and then repeats the cycle again.
Cycle. Yep, absolutely. And it's a full culture that supports that. Like that type of behavior.
And then for that third leg of what you were talking about on the 3-part: education, specific, but support. So then the culture becomes the supportive part of that equation.
Yeah, if it wasn't supported, then people would change. In fact, there's some blue zones. They did the study on longevity, and then they went back and did studies on happiness, and they were trying to do the same thing. It was a more difficult study for lots of different reasons, but when they were going through trying to figure out what makes people happy, one of the primary things that made people happy was simply where you lived. Like, it was the biggest factor in happiness was, where do you live? You move people, and they would do studies from immigrants who would immigrate from very unhappy, called very like war-torn cultures, to other cultures where things were more peaceful, and they would take studies of, you know, where their happiness levels were, and they would find that across the board it was depressed, and then when they would go into like, their happiness levels were lowered. What I mean by depressed, not depression. And then when they go into a new culture, their happiness will rise to the same level as the culture, as an overall statistic.
Well,
so
there's that other, what is that word? Homeostasis. You know,
kind of.
But the same thing. If I'm coming in here and it's here, there's no choice. I've got to homeostase with that. Now, if that wasn't here, if that was here, that also has a reverse effect.
Right,
if I'm here, and I mean, homeostasis is, it's not a good or bad. It's not like, oh, it only moves positive.
Right.
It's the balancing of the energy there. Absolutely.
And we see that even further in other types of research, where they show that if your closest friendships, right, your 3 to 5 best friends that you see on a regular basis, if they are alcoholics, if they do drugs, if they're obese, your chances of doing the same things are significantly increased.
Absolutely.
So it's important to have a good tribe.
That homeostasis thing is that something, as we're talking about individuals, so anybody listening to this, is to understand that you're moving a needle, you're moving it. So don't get defeated. You're not going to move it that quickly. All you're doing is trying to move it a little bit. So do a consistent small step change. You're going to change homeostasis. Do another one, you're going to change homeostasis. Homeostasis doesn't jump up here. It's not a jump. It's a gradual moving of all the different factors and things like that.
Yeah.
So I know one thing we can't do is we cannot not have a conversation when it comes to nutrition and well-being in July of 2020 in the midst of COVID-19. So I want to segue a little bit into that. As before we got on today, you know, I got a NPR push notification. California's down in lockdown. We know that New Orleans, in our own state of in our city of New Orleans, they're having to close a lot of things. There's spikes in transmission and things like that. What craziness this is. My God, dude. I mean, who would have known that March of 9th or 8th or 10th or whatever it was,
that would still be,
and just the still unknown, the unknown. There's so much.
Right.
And so I would love for you just to, you know, talk a little bit about, because we recognize nutrition, and nutrition is immune system, and a virus attacks, you know, the body and stuff. So these things that you can share with that relate to your experience and the stuff that you know.
Well, if you give me a little leeway, I want to try and put some context on it.
Perfect.
So the first thing is I'm not a medical doctor, and my expertise is in nutrition. So I want to be fair that when I'm saying that within that context. And then along with that, what I think has hit me the biggest when looking at COVID-19 was the issue with comorbidities. So comorbidities are lifestyle diseases that we typically we as adults grow into, that we die from. That's where the morbidity comes from. So when I'm talking about things like hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, kidney disease, liver disease, these diseases many times are either related to or caused by poor lifestyle, particularly poor nutrition, and they're very high in the United States. And I think in what really hit me home to me and hurt me a little bit was the fact that when I was looking at a lot of statistics coming from the CDC and out of our Louisiana, out of the death rate tolls and who was affected and how was it affected them, people who had these comorbidities were dying at a significantly higher rate. In fact, at one point in time, if you had hypertension and you got COVID-19, you had a 60% chance of passing away due to COVID-19. Yes. And it's not to say that if you're perfectly healthy, COVID-19 won't hurt you or can't kill you. What it is to say is that if you are healthy and you do not have these comorbidities because you're just generally healthier because you're younger or you eat better or whatever reason, the chances of COVID-19 having a bigger destructive hit on you are reduced significantly. Right. And the best way we could set ourselves up for success with that is to be healthier through more activity, through better food and all that stuff. Now, when you're talking about what food should you eat, again, there's a lot of arguments and debates, but I try to
exactly. It's like one day don't eat the potato skin, the next year eat the potato skin, the next year don't eat the flesh. And I know that's just like a little granular example, but you're right. It's like they're constant. They're 1 year tomato's gonna kill you. The next thing's the greatest power food you ever had in the life. I can't believe that little tomato that I love growing is gonna kill me. But go ahead.
Right. So let me address some of those because there's a lot of stuff like that comes out. I want to kind of express why they come together, why we have these sort of debates, and then to put them in context. So you mentioned tomatoes. Let me go with that one because that's a good one to talk about. There's a medical doctor who's a heart surgeon who's very, very talented, who's very intelligent, and he's come out and put a true statement that there's a chemical inside of nightshade plants. Tomatoes is a nightshade plant. And certain tubers and other foods, legumes or beans that is toxic. This is a true statement. But that being said, to assert that toxicity is what's hurting Americans or causing the immune system to go to hell, that's a hard statement to sell. And I'll give you a couple reasons why. Because a lot of people who are living the longest, healthiest lives, the blue zones, the Mediterranean, Asia, they're all eating. That's what they're eating.
You ain't going to Italy and Turkey without a dang tomato at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm sorry, I cook it, right?
And there's a lot of research saying that legumes and beans, having a cup of them a day on average extends life expectancy. In fact, there's a good example of this right here in America.
But if you're knocking down 8 packs of chocolate chip cookies and swallowing red wine with that, you can eat all the cup of beans you want. It's not going to extend.
So that's a fair statement. So when you're talking about nutrition, we are trying to figure these things out. So that chemical that what we're talking about, and I always pronounce it wrong, but I call it a lichen, but I think that's not the right way to pronounce it. So, and what happens is that in its substance, like in a dried bean, there's a toxic load in it. And in fact, in Japan, a health guru got on TV as if they need to lose weight. But he said, because they're so lean to begin with, the whole society. But he said to lose weight, puree dried beans and sprinkle it over your white rice, and that'll help you lose weight. He put 500 people in the hospital with poisoning because of that. They said, oh, well, beans are bad for you, and this chemical will kill you.
Because it's a higher toxic level in the dry bean is what you were saying. Because
in the dry bean, but when you cook it, and like everybody does, it's destroyed to the point where you almost can't find it. And in fact, certain chemicals that are anti-nutrients or that are toxic, like phytic acid or other things like that, in normal eaten amounts by human beings in regular diets, old school cultural diets like the Mediterranean and throughout Africa and Latin America and Asia, we find that those actually have positive benefits. And the easiest way to make that example is alcohol. So alcohol is a poison. It's by definition a poison. You have to detoxify it. But small amounts of it taken on a regular basis seem to have health effects, as that certain populations of people who drink alcohol versus those who do not have actually been shown to live longer. So yes, lots of alcohol will destroy your liver and kill you overnight, but small amounts seem to have a health benefit. So when you're talking about how complicated the nutrition world is, that's just the beginning of the controversies that come through. Right. So when we're talking about what you should personally do for COVID, a lot of it is just grandma common sense, like real food and a normal amount is the most important thing you do without overthinking anything. One medium plate at a time, and go back for seconds of mostly real foods and much more fruits and vegetables than you currently eat now. That is the most important thing.
My doctor of natural medicine broke it down simply for me. She goes 80-20. I want to see 80 colors, 80% of that plate in various colors of beans or whatever.
Yeah.
And then whatever that meat or that protein is the 20% or the fat over there. You just stick it like that. You make it look like a pretty picture. You're going to be fine as a basic starting point.
I think generally speaking, that's what a simple plate by plate meal,
plate by plate. Now, like you said, if I'm going to jump in there at 7, like last night, I didn't get a chance to get into the kitchen until 8 o'clock. I have a good stock of fresh produce as opposed to frozen produce. Last night was frozen produce because I didn't want to take the time to chop, et cetera, which is
fine.
minutes, but still, bam, within 25 minutes, it's done, not overthinking it. And the stuff is good to the point that one of the children who don't eat most of the stuff I cook ate it. And I'm like, all right, well, there, that's a good sign right there. But exactly, not overthinking it, but just having some basic understanding of quantity of natural food over non-natural food, over processed food.
And I think that's where the argument can get rough on people, is that whenever we try to go into it, we go into a very advanced debate over carbohydrates and organic and GMO.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right. But if you do that debate before you have a foundation of simply really good food for an extended period of time, you're just putting the cart before the horse. It's like, yeah, maybe you'll have a food allergy that needs to be addressed. Maybe you'll need a more advanced thing to get to just super ripped, whatever you want to be. But if you don't have a foundation of good eating, you're just throwing darts in the dark.
That's brilliant. I've never heard it said that way, Kirk. Okay. What I really resonated something there. Don't overthink it coming out the gate.
Yes.
Something.
Yeah.
When you're starting, an extra load of squash ain't gonna kill you, or extra little bit more rice. In the overall scheme of as you're evaluating and reprocessing your foundation. But I hear you, because I've gotten caught in that before a lot. It's like, okay, what rice is this and things that and the other, and it's overwhelming because I don't have the education. It's not a specific thing for me to do, and I don't have a support thing. So finally, I'm like, screw it, just give me a pizza.
Well, I was thinking about this before we got on to talk today, and with meditation in particular. If you don't know how to meditate, or it seems really intimidating, you won't do it. And so you don't get the results immediately as fast as you want. And then what happens, it just becomes so intimidating, you won't do it at all. And meditation, whether you get it perfect or not, the practice of the meditation itself works when you do it.
That's the benefit. Right. That's the benefit of just sitting and doing it. There's no success factor in it. I spent 10 years hating to meditate. Didn't do it for a long time. It wasn't until I found an easier way of just like, oh, meditation can be breathing.
Yeah.
All right. I breathe 3 breaths. Nice. And the next day I breathe 7 breaths. Next day, 10 breaths, and so on and such as that, especially with such an intimidating word as meditation. But just breathing is breathing. We're going to breathe anyway, but you're right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
But I really do want to emphasize that when it comes to the fixing of the plate, start somewhere.
I think that I love that concept. And what I tell a lot of my clients and people is, look, if you get the foundation of food right, and this becomes a lifestyle where this is what you're doing, the chances are you won't need advanced nutrition. I mean, people come to me, and particularly when I was younger and I was in grad school and I was doing all this research, I was this sort of nutrition, like over sciencey guy. And I couldn't wait for somebody to ask me a nutrition question so I can get into a debate. I was really kind of a jerk about it. What I found was people were not doing very well, and that's not what they needed. I have so many stories where that was not what people needed at all. For example, I had an engineer friend of mine who was who wanted help from me in health coaching. And she came in and she's like, I'm going to be an Ironman. Like that's the triathletes that are superstars. And she was already a fit person. And she's like, I need to drop 20 pounds. I need my food to be on point because I'm eating like an American. And so I need this to work out. And so I was intimidated by her. I'm like, she's an athlete. She needs a very specific. So she came to my office when I was working in the corporate world. And she said, okay, give me what you got. And man, I beat her over the head with science. I overeducated to the point, and I gave her like an idea of what to do next. Like, this is what I want you to try to do. She came back a week later in tears. She's like, I just can't do this. This is terrible. So I sent her home. I said, all right, this is what I want you to do. I want you to make 2 fists. All right, here you go. I want you to eat this many fruits and vegetables every time you eat anything, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. Just do that.
Yeah.
She came back a month later. She had lost 15 pounds and was having the best racing of her life. Before you go advanced, you have to have a platform to stand on. And now I think that was held true for business, for parenthood, for everything.
Life in general. And there's a phrase I like using, and that is, meet them where they are. You meet someone where they are. I can't get you. It's unrealistic, cruel to think that I'm going to get someone who's never sat and breathed for 5 minutes to a point of doing a meditation for 20 minutes.
Right.
That's impossible. And so meet them where they are. Meet them where you are, where you're at right now. Acknowledge whatever you're eating right now, and let's switch one of those little parts. Let's do this little thing. Add a little bit more water here. 1 less Diet Coke a day. Things like that. And just little pieces, because it is so overwhelming just in general. And I can't think of any more area of our lives that's more complicated to research on your own than nutrition. It's scary to think of someone trying to figure this out by Googling things and looking at.
Oh, it's a mess.
It really is. And I love your example of, go grandmama with it, and
absolutely.
Or go old school with it. If you didn't have a grandmama that did that, you kind of got an idea of what it was. Go get an old school cookbook or something of that nature, and break it down to the basics.
So I'd like to plug a guy who doesn't know me and doesn't give me any money. He's a chef. He's a superstar chef, and I own most of his cookbooks. And his name is Rick Bayless. He's one of the greatest chefs in the world. And he's a brilliant guy. He was actually doing a PhD in anthropology in Mexico when he quit that to become a chef. That seems like a crazy career change. But he does that. He becomes a super famous chef and cookbook author. He wins Top Chef Masters, like the one where all the superstars.
Okay, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Right.
I used to eat, breathe, and live that show. Okay, I know exactly who you're talking about. Okay.
And so you look at Rick. Rick is around 60 right now. If you look at a picture of him, you wouldn't believe it because he looks great. He's super fit. He does yoga like you do. He does some weightlifting. But he had gotten pudgy. Like, he had gained some weight being a chef. That's pretty natural. And so he didn't like that. So he wrote a cookbook on his experience over a couple of years of changing that. Now, if you saw him, you would never believe he was ever overweight, because he is literally shredded for a 60-year-old guy. He's impressive. And he's one of the greatest chefs on the planet. Right. And remember, he was doing a PhD. So this is a smart guy who could do some research. In one of his books called Mexican Every Day, the first chapter is just an opening introduction of his experience doing this. And he's not an expert in nutrition. He's an expert in cooking. Where he talks about trying to research nutrition and just getting so frustrated with the back and forth yelling between all the experts. And he just basically said, the heck with y'all. I'm just going to eat real food that has been around forever in Mexico, that I love cooking and chefs most work with. And I'm going to drop most of the junk and most of the sugary drinks.
There you go.
And just have, celebration foods when I want to have celebration foods. And so he goes through just a simple process of explaining how he did that and listening to his body, eating what he really felt actually was hungry for. And that process, you're talking about one of the greatest palates in the world, looks shredded and super healthy. He looks like he's defying age. And he's not doing with super science. He's doing it with some of the tastiest foods in the world, and some of the best cookbooks in the world, because he put basic principles together. And again, like we were saying before, it's not that there aren't advanced nutrition concepts that do crazy things.
Let's start where you are.
Yeah, start where you are.
And if that's where you really want to be, you'll get there. But start with the foundation. That's amazing. Looks like you and I are going to have another one of these.
Oh, I would love to.
We didn't even get to some of the other stuff, but still we'll do that. But in last couple of minutes, what we'll do is just kind of close it out. With COVID-19 and with the uncertainty, with the nutrition aspect, I'll lay something else on in tandem with that. A partner of that is the mental aspect. Getting outside, one thing that I saw that I thought was beautiful on so many levels was when there was the shelter in place, the people walking in neighborhoods, people in backyards. I saw more friends of mine with kids outside on, in social media and stuff like that than I ever had in my life. And I thought to myself, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. I hope somehow that becomes part of the new normal. But the mindfulness of just being present with it, the fact that we didn't have to go to the office 8:30 to 5 every day, and that we can work with Zoom meeting. A lot of things that shifted in that, I feel will become part of the new culture eventually after we stop, going back and forth mentally with the struggle. But yeah.
Well, I hope so. I noticed that exact same
Somebody's
thing.
going to. It may not be everybody, but somebody.
Well, so when I noticed the moving around and getting outside a lot, and when I talked to my wife, I was like, I really am curious to see if that becomes more normal, and we see a lot more of that. And I've seen it tailored off back to semi-normal levels beforehand, and so that worries me a little bit. Like, I don't have all the answers to this sort of stuff, and what I do believe is probably true is that if we're going to solve these sort of lifestyle issues when it comes to health, emotional health, physical health, and all that, that it's going to take a combination of things that we personally do and then community change, where you will need the support of the communities actually restructuring itself to support better behaviors, to give that. Because I just don't think we can do it in large, at least not, some people are just built that way, but in large groups of people, to get them all going in it, we have to have that support from the community with the education and the practices for it to work.
And I'll add to that, we're not just, we're restructuring a status quo of decades and hundreds of years that we're changing. Yeah. So
absolutely,
that needle slow, right? I mean, you're going against a lot of programming, a lot of learned stuff, a lot of reactionary things that we of a country that has built into our process that we're but again, that goes back to, don't overthink it. Don't think too big on that, because it's self-defeating.
Right.
Add an extra vegetable.
I like that. That would be a win.
Just add some snow pea or something, and you can buy them frozen. It's fine,
Absolutely.
The other thing is, adding vegetables to your plate and then covering it with mayonnaise and all. Okay, just, just don't bother, because you just
dropping the 3 B's on it: bacon, butter, and barbecue sauce.
Bacon, butter, and barbecue. Just, it's amazing how snow pea tastes with salt and lemon. It really. Oh man, Kirk. Well, let's see. We got a lot. I'm gonna put some summary stuff in our posting and the text and everything. But I appreciate your time today. I treasure you as a friend. Thank you for the time. We're going to be doing one in a couple more weeks and circling back and talking about some more. I'd like to go a little deeper in a couple of these things that you mentioned that I read.
I like anything for you, man.
Absolutely. And just my love to the family, love to you, and thank you again.
You mind if I plug my cooking show?
Nope. I was hoping you would. I'm going to put the link in and I'm also putting the link in the comments. But
appreciate that. So, gang, if you want to know more about me and what I do, you can follow me on Facebook. I'm easy to find on Facebook, Foodwall Solutions, or just Kirk Vidrine. And every weekend now, we kick back up again. I do a cooking class that is about really good food and really easy to make on these and a healthy, tasty, but not overly crazy nutrition.
Well, and I've watched them, and that's one of the things that you do make it. You make it easy and attainable. It's not like I've got to, there's two sides of cooking to me. There's the Julia Child kind of, where all that, right? I got to pull out the pots, all that. Then there's the other one that is my 25 minutes. 25 minutes. I want 25 minutes. I want it easy. I want it fun. I want it fast. I want it healthy. And so that's what I love about the way you make it, because I know what you're doing is you're making these small little examples of this is how simple this can be.
Well, and we're hoping, like my wife really pushed me on this, is to develop the skill of cooking more than anything else. A lot of people get intimidated by, they have a recipe and it's got to be this recipe. And chefs are not like that. When you look at them, they take the base of a recipe and which is already good. You learn how to the technique of making that, and then you see how you can substitute not only for your flavors, but for whatever's around. I can't tell you how many of the best meals I've had came from, oh God, it's Tuesday night, I have no idea what's in the house, like just find something and throw it together. Yeah, you did that last night.
Seriously. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, as you experiment with more stuff and seasonings and flavorings and powders and herbs and everything else, I literally, and I realize I'm special in this. So I just go buy produce. I'm not really thinking, okay, this time of year, what looks good? Throw it in the refrigerator. And then when it comes time to cook, I don't pre-plan anything. I open that big vegetable drawer. I'm like, all right.
What looks sharp?
Squash. Okay, I didn't had you. Or squash, you're getting a little old. I need a cookie because I can't stand throwing stuff away. Right? One of those. And I'm like, all right, what am I? Okay, dill and squash and zucchini with a little olive oil, a little bit of garlic, and salt. Boom, done.
Yeah,
okay, you're absolutely done. That's my tangy over there. Whatever rice or, you know, I've fallen in love with spaghetti squash because I can microwave the damn thing.
And it's fast.
But it is. The food speaks to me. I don't meal plan. And actually, I've been told when I actually try to plan recipes, they are less good than when I intuitively do it, just get in there and start throwing things around, you know, so.
Yeah, look, hey, the skill set is what we're looking for.
That's it.
If you can get a skill set and just some basic principles, then you can make it yours, which I think is the most important.
Thank you for that cookbook idea, because I do realize I do want to become a better cook. And I don't look at my cookbooks. I got cookbooks, but I don't look at them like, that's too complicated. But I'm going to start once a week. I'm going to do it you did
once a week.
Okay, yeah, once a week. Any more than I'm a fail miserably at that. But again, my brother, thank you so much. Be well.
Always a pleasure.
All right, talk to you soon. Take care.
Yes, sir.